When CJ came that day, we knew he'd be early. We knew there was a risk of him going to NICU. I didn't really mind that, but Dr. Connor had said if he comes out crying, that would be a really good sign. I told everyone I didn't care if it was a boy or a girl, I just wanted a healthy baby, which I genuinely thought at the time, until they pulled down that drape. And I realised it was a boy and how much I wanted one. You know, if I could relive another day, maybe don't tell Joe, it wouldn't be the wedding day, but it was that day because I knew we had the two girls to bring CJ home to, and it was just so perfect. He was a really smart kid. I could tell it from the start. I knew once he started hitting the milestones, he was clever. He was, you know, I'm not doing that in The Proud Mother. I could see it. I could see it in the way he played with toys, the way he worked things out, the way when he wanted to get something, he knew, like, you know, and that was really early. He was going to probably have his dad's sense of humour. There was that cheeky chappy, like, definitely, and he was going to get away with it too because he had that smile. And he loved the girls. He loved the girls playing with them. We were like sideline, like once Roshan and Clodagh came into the room. He just wanted them, and they had a way to make him light up and engage that almost Joe and I couldn't, unless there was no one else in the room, and then he'd take us for second fiddle. But yeah, you know, I'd like to think if he had had a full long life, he would have done amazing things. But I also think in 21 months with no words, he's done more than most of us could ever imagine. So around September, he was 8 months old, he started vomiting. We thought he had a bug, so we went, after a couple of days we brought him to the doctor and he put him on antibiotics. He had a red throat, sore throat, and he was really out of sorts for a week. Joe was working in America for a week, so I was on my own with the three. And I remember he was very rarely a needy baby. Like, he loved to be cuddled, but he was quite happy in his own. But over the course of that week at night time, he kind of would only settle if he was in my arms, which was, you know, very unlike him. And I noticed in his sit, he was just a little bit wobbly and his head was just a little bit off. I met a doctor, an eagle-eyed paediatrician is how I describe her, and she listened to me as a mother when I said those few neurological things that bothered me. Him being out of sorts had bothered me, you know, just his behaviour. He had this effortless vomiting, which I now know, I didn't at the time, but effortless will be the key word for a brain tumour. He had no temperature. There was nothing else wrong with him. He would get sick and he would literally turn around and smile again. You know, there was no, it wasn't an overwhelming kind of feeling for him. You could tell once he got sick he was fine, until the point he was dehydrated. So that was kind of, and she said that she was going to send him for a CT scan. But the words were there, you know, it's cancer, it's aggressive, it's already in his spine. And we went back to the ward and Joe and I held him, we held each other. And there was a little bit of a sense of deja vu feeling in that the ground had been pulled from under you. CJ's cancer type is ATRT, which we didn't tell a lot of people at the time because if you Google it, there's no good things. You know, survival rate was very low, 5 to 15% from the outset. But if we hadn't had that intervention, if we hadn't got into the hospital, if we hadn't got the scan, and if we hadn't found out it was a tumour, then we would have had it in no time. We had such fun and such unbelievable joy with CJ on the ward, through his treatment, through some of the worst days. We found that little bit of joy, his smile, you know, you find hope somewhere. And we were in the darkest place. So CJ's legacy to me is to try and tell people through his life, because he had no words, but by his life to tell people that you can't stop living because you don't know how long you're here for. So we found out at the end of August that, well, we found out in June that there was small growth, which we knew wasn't good news with ATRT because it is so aggressive. And then the end of August, he had an absent seizure. We had another CT scan and it confirmed that there was further growth. And an MRI then showed that his time was limited. I don't know if it's, you know, people say like you get this lease of life before you go, like he certainly did. he had so much time for everyone in those few days and weeks. Everyone got to play with him and hold him, and I think he loved being centre of attention. I think he really fed off that. Been wheeled around. He got this chair that he didn't essentially need, but it was from the OT for when we were feeding him. But it was on wheels, and he just loved being wheeled around. He's like a real king of the castle, and he was just in great form. You know, it's amazing what the brain can do to cope. But like from the time we knew of CJ's ATRT diagnosis, it was a probability rather than a possibility that he would die. So we knew we were really up against it. But yet it still came as a shock, you know, when that the time was so limited. And I remember the day I wanted to bring him to, there's a bridge beside the house that I always, well, maybe 15-minute walk away, and I always go there to pray and to throw my wishes in the water. And I really wanted to bring CJ there again. And the palliative care nurse came in, and I was holding CJ, and Joe said, Niamh wants to bring CJ for a walk down to the bridge. And she was so gentle. She laid her hand on my arm, and she said, CJ's not going to go for a walk today, Niamh. So CJ passed away on my chest, the same way as he came into the world when they lay him on it. And I know it probably sounds a bit bizarre to the outside world, but it could not have been any more beautiful. I feel like we were given magic in CJ for us, but I also feel a huge duty to have learned from him and to bestow those lessons on other people. Because the way he carried himself from 10 months or 9 months when he was admitted to 21 months, going through what he did without ever being able to tell us, but we knew he just wanted to laugh and smile and play. And you know, it's like with any child, you take away all the objects and the material stuff and the money because they don't care for it, and you know, the houses, they don't care for any of that stuff because they just want to have joy in that moment. You know, they're so present tense, and that was CJ, and that's how we all should be living. So even when you have these obstacles, even when you're in this dark place, never stop living. Just living is easy. You know, that's the easy part. It's that when things are hard that, you know, that you make the choice, because it's a choice in your head. And, you know, for good or for bad, Joe and I have had to make, you know, big decisions and choices in really intense times of living. But I feel like CJ will guide those choices now, because how would CJ have faced this? How would he have, you know, dealt with this, even when life is really intense? And I know the answer. And I hope that other people, you know, will learn from that too, that life is really, really precious.